Yo, welcome in. You are watching TapX, a channel dedicated to video games, music, and providing a unique viewer experience. For more information, please refer to my panels.
TapX. What up? You're watching TapX, and tonight we're going to be reading a book. Chilling. You want to read the book? Or wherever your chat is, there's a link. I'll get you access to the book. I'm going to be listening to music while we read. Now, also invited to join the Discord. Let me get you a link. Working on all sorts of cool shit for the Discord. We got cool roles. I'm currently in the Keep, where we talk about life, theories, paranormal, with cool shit. With cool stuff. Now, The Crack in the Cosmic Egg by Joseph Chilton Pearce. Challenging constructs of mind and reality. Now, reading on stream is going to be a new thing I'm going to start doing. Types of stuff I'm going to read, take with a grain of salt. It's not like... Take what you will from it, okay? Feel free to comment and discuss what you want. If you join the Discord and you have the role speaker, you'll have access to the voice chat. Talk about it. Now to the book. I am skipping the preface of this introduction here. I'm going to go ahead and skip. I'm going to read what I can. I'm going to be reading what I can, and then if I need, I'll have the thing read for me. Chapter 1. Circles and Lines. There is a relationship between what we think is out there in the world and what we experience as being out there. There is a way in which the energy of thought and the energy of matter modify each other and interrelate. A kind of rough mirroring takes place between our mind and our reality. If you want to follow along with me, I'll highlight as we read. We cannot stand outside this mirroring process and examine it, though, for we are the process to an unknowable extent. Any technique we might use to look objectively at our reality becomes a part of the event in question. We are an indeterminately large part of the function that shapes the reality from which we do our looking. Our looking enters as one of the determinants in the reality event that we see. It's already sounding like Morpheus, right? This mirroring between mind and reality can be analyzed and more actively directed if we can suspend some of our ordinary assumptions. For instance, the procedure of mirroring must be considered the only fixed element, while the products of the procedure must be considered relative. A gentleman named William Blake claimed that perception was the universal, the perceived object was the particular. What is discovered by man is never the universal or cosmic truth. Rather, the process by which the mind brings about a discovery is itself the universal. Self-revelation, if you will. Jerome Bruner of Harvard's Center of Cognitive Studies doubts that there is a world available for direct touch. We are not in a subjective trap of our own making either. Rather, we represent the world to ourselves and respond to our representations. There is, I would add, a subtle and random way in which the world responds to our representation too. Naive realism and naive idealism must be equally dismissed if we are to grasp the mirroring function of mind and reality toward which Bruner points. We got some eggshells cracking yet? We are referred to the author's guide to the references and bibliography system described on page 185. This book is like 98 pages, so we'll see how far we get tonight. I am right here. We used to believe that our perceptions, our seeing, hearing, feeling, and so on, were reactions to active impingements or impingements on them by the world out there. We thought our perceptions then sent these outside messages to the brain, where we put together a reasonable idea of what was out there. We know now that our concepts, our notions, or basic assumptions actively direct our percepts. Say hi. We see, feel, and hear according to what Bruner calls a selective program of the mind. Our mind directs our sensory apparatus every bit as much as our sensory apparatus informs the mind. It used to be thought that the physical was a fixed entity out there, unaffected by anything our transient incidental thoughts might make of it. Holding to this idea today are the tough-minded and boastful posturing of a realistic, no-nonsense objectivity, cloaks a narrow and pedantic selective blindness, a realism that sees only what has been established as safe to see. Cognitive dissonance, maybe, to an extent. Kitty kitty. Yet, there is a way in which physical and mental events merge and influence each other. A change of worldview can change the world viewed. Ooh, that's a bar if I ever heard one. A change of worldview can change the world viewed. Okay. And I am not referring to such parlor games as influencing the roll of dice. The stakes are higher, the relationships more subtle, far-reaching. For instance, as a young man, I once found myself in a certain trance-like state of mind, which I will later in this book define as autistic. In the peculiarities of this frame of reference, I suddenly knew myself to be impervious to pain or injury. Upwards of a dozen witnesses, I held the glowing tips of cigarettes against my palms, cheeks, eyelids, grinding them out on the sensitive areas. Finally, I held the tips of several cigarettes tightly between my lips and blew sparks over my amazed companions. To the real consternation of my dormitory fellows, there was no after effects, no blisters, no later signs of my folly. Let's go one page for now. A little more visually pleasing. I am right here in the top. This stimulated the physics majors to test the temperature of a cigarette tip, which I found to be around 1380 degrees Fahrenheit. My contact with such heat had been quite genuine, steady, and prolonged. Later, when I did a bit of research on Hindu firewalking, I understood quite well the state of mind involved. Though I never again achieved it myself, it was apparent to me, however, that I had suspended my ordinary thinking and was using a mode of mind strongly suggestive of early childhood. At the same time, I was aware of myself, though experiencing some dissociation within, rather as though I were sitting and watching myself. Right here. Several things intrigued me about this venture. First, of course, why were the ordinary reactions of live flesh to extreme heat not operative under that strange state of mind? What was the state of mind? Could the reality of this state be different from the reality of ordinary thinking? And if so, was there a relative and arbitrary quality to any reality state? What were the possibilities of this kind of thinking, particularly if it could be controlled by a fully operational conscious person? Parentheses, I had surely not been fully operational, and the cigarette trick was the only expression of imperviousness my imagination could resize on. End parentheses. Last but not least, certain of my tough-minded colleagues of later years were so unnecessarily hostile to my accounts of this and similar personal experiences. Why did they refuse to believe the experience had taken place? Why did they insist that I had hallucinated? Simply misinterpreted my data? Or was just lying? This threw another aspect into my search. In addition to trying to determine the role of our concept-percept interaction plays in a reality, why is our ordinary logical thinking so hostile to these rifts in the common fabric? I think the line between doctor and quack is very, very thin. Right? What do I know, right? We are right here. I'm gonna try to speed it up a little bit. It's hard to read this shit fast because of the content. The author is really nailing some pretty out there and wild points very consistently. If this were like a video game, it kind of reminds me of Sekiro, right? No, it's like, whoa, holy shit, what did I get myself into here? Valid points already brought up was the mind over matter, you know, like firewalking. The author going into an experience when they were a child and being able to burn themselves without scarring or burning. Let's just continue reading, see what we find out. You're right here. Reality is not a fixed entity. It is an interlocking of moving events. Okay. Now we're talking time. I love time talk. Quantum physics. And events do not just happen to us. We are an integral part of every event. We enter into the shape of events, even as we long for an absolute in which to rest. It may be just as longing for an absolute in which our concepts might not have to be responsible for our percepts, though indirectly our reality. That explains the hostility of our ordinary intellect to these shadowy modes of mind. Later, I will try to summarize how an infant's mind is shaped into a reality-adjusted personality, and show how this representation helps determine the reality in which the adult then moves. By analyzing how our representations of the world come about, we may be able to grasp the arbitrary, thus flexible nature of our reality. The way we represent the world arises, though, from our whole social fabric, as Bruner put it. There is no escaping this rich web of language, myth, history, ways of doing things, unconsciously accepted attitudes, notions, and so on, for these make up our only reality. If this social fabric tends to become our shroud, the only way out by the same weaving process, or there is only the one. So we need to find out all we can about the loom involved, weave with imagination and vision, rather than allow the process to happen as a random fate. Those two paragraphs introduce time, as well as destiny and fate, being able to choose and claim your fate. Our inherited representation, our world of view, is a language-made affair. It varies from culture to culture. Edward Sapir, the linguist, called this idea of ours that we adjust to reality without the use of language and illusion. He claimed that the real world, to a large extent, built up on the language habits of the group. None of us exercises our logical social thinking as a blank slate, or as a photographic plate, seeing what is actually there. We focus on the world through an aesthetic prism from which we can never be free except by exchanging prisms. There's no pure looking with a naked, innocent eye. When I found myself in that peculiar twilight world in which fire no longer burned me, I had not found the true reality or the truth. I had simply skipped over some syllogisms of our ordinary logical world and restructured an event not dependent on ordinary criteria. Even our most critical, analytical, scientific, or detached looking is a verification search, sifting through possibilities for synthesis that will strengthen the hypothesis that generate the search. Our worldview is a cultural pattern that shapes our mind from birth. It happens to us as fate. We speak of a child becoming reality adjusted. As it responds, it becomes a cooperating strand in a social web. We are shaped by this web. It determines the way we think, the way we see what we see. It is our pattern of representation, and our response sustains the pattern. Yet any worldview is arbitrary to an indeterminable extent. This arbitrariness is difficult to recognize since our worldview is determined by our worldview. To consider our worldview arbitrary and flexible automatically places our world of reality in the same questionable position. And yet, we are always changing this worldview. We represent such changes as discoveries of absolutes in order to protect ourselves from our arbitrary status and to avoid the implication that thinking is a creative process. We deny that disciplines of mind synthetically create. We insist we are but discovering nature's truths. We possess an open-ended potential of considerable variance with contemporary nihilisms, but we must recognize and accept the dynamic interplay of representation and response. We are not to be acted on, rather fully acted. Nope, too much. Too much. I'm gonna have to make that word tab. For instance, years after my little Fireburn experience, my world faced dissolution, 2 massive radical surgeries, and other macabre manipulations of my wife failed to check a malignancy wildly stimulated by the growth hormones of pregnancy. Finally, having had everything cut off or out, she offered little for further experimentation. The priest of the scalpel passed judgment and gave her but a few short weeks to live. Surely the evidence was in their favor. Nevertheless, I remembered that strange world of which fire could not burn and entered into a crash program to find that crack in the egg that might restructure events more in our favor. During 5 and 6 day fasts, I subjected her to a total brainwash day and night, never letting her mind alone. Through all her waking hours, I read her literature related to healing. While she slept, I endlessly repeated suggestions of hope and strength. I had no thought of how the restructuring would take place, but in a few hours, some 3 weeks later, She was suddenly healed and quite well. We went back to the temple, I with misgivings over such a risk with the new structure to have the priest declare us clean, and that we were duty declared and recorded with the reaction pattern among the many doctors of that research center running the gamut. From emotional talk about miracles, brass tack realists soon rebounded with dire warnings that some fluke had occurred, and that we should present ourselves regularly for constant watches for the inevitable reoccurrence, the sort of doubt category I would have avoided at all costs. True, a year or so later, our carefully balanced private world fell apart. This began when it became obvious that our last child, born in the midst of all that carnage, was in serious trouble. When the trouble proved to be severe, cerebral palsy, our bubble burst, the dragon roared back, and within weeks my world was in ruins. Yikes. That's tough. Hold up, give me 1 sec. I don't know where Kiros is, but he should be up here kicking it. Kiros, where you at? So where are we? We're right here. Nevertheless, by a change of concept. Hold on, give me a sec. Nevertheless, by a change of concept concerning possibilities, we beat the broad way of this mystical world, if only for a while. Social fabric is sustained by agreement on which phenomena are currently acceptable. Van Langer referred to nature as a language-made affair, subject to collapse into chaos should ideation fail. Strange. Part of this chaos proves sufficient stimulus to ensure a ready granting ability to the current ideas. Strangely, even when this ideation decrees that a particular event must end in death, most people would rather accept the sentence than risk the chaos. To be realistic is the high mark of intellect, and assures the strengthening of those acceptances that make up the reality and so determine what thoughts are realistic. Our representation response interplay is self-verifying and circular. We are always in a process of laying our cosmic egg. The way by which our reality picture is changed provides a clue to the whole process. Change a concept changes one's reality to some degrees, and concepts direct percepts as much as percepts and concepts. There are peculiarities and exceptions, such as my no-fiber venture, by which our inherited fabric is bypassed temporarily in small private ways. These are linear thrusts that break through the circles of fantasy, picking up our reality. Metanoia? The Greek word for conversion, fundamental transformation of mind. It is the process by which concepts are reorganized. Metanoia is a specialized, intensified, adult form of the same worldview development found shaping the mind of the infant. Formerly associated with religion, metanoia proves to be the way in which all genuine education takes place. Hold on 1 sec. Nope, nope, don't. Metanoia. Metanoia. Alright, that's how you say it. Alright, metanoia proves to be the way by which all genuine education takes place. Michael P. points out that a conversion shapes the mind of the student into the physicist. Metanoia is a seizure by the discipline given total attention and restructuring of the attending mind. Reshaping of the mind is the principal key to the reality function. Crazy. Yikes. Same procedure found in worldview development of the child, the metanoia. Metanoia, that's what I said. In the same procedure found in worldview development of the child, the metanoia of the advanced student, with the conversion to a religion, be traced as well in the question-answer process, the purposing and eventual filling of an empty category in science. Asking of an untimely serious question, which means in turn by an untimely serious quest, shapes our concepts in favor of the kinds of perceptions needed to see the desired answer. I think I need to get higher for this. I'm gonna open this here. Oh, lordy lord. Exploring this reality function shows how and why we weep as we sow, individually and collectively. Let's read that part again. Exploring this reality function shows how and why we reap as we sow, individually and collectively. But no simple one-to-one correspondence is implied. Success or failure of any idea is subject to an enormous web of contingency. So, any idea seriously entertained, however, tends to bring about the realization of itself and will, regardless of the nature of the idea, to the extent it can be free of ambiguities. The empty category of science, as an example, will be explored later. The same function is triggered by any set of expectancies, as for instance, that is right. For instance, in my wife's case, a grandmother who had died of cancer was a family legend. And all the females scrupulously avoided all the maneuvers rumored to have possibly caused the horror. Then in neat diabolical 2-year intervals, my wife's favorite aunt died of cancer. Her mother developed cancer but survived the radical surgery of mutilation. Her father then followed and died in spite of extensive medical machinations. Naturally, 2 years after burying her father, my wife's own debacle occurred in spite of her constant submissions to the high priest for inspection, test, and no doubt full confession. The fact that all these carcinomas were of different sorts, opposite sides of the family, was incidental. Few people understood my fury when the medical center that had attended my wife requested that I bring my just budding teenage daughter for regular 6 monthly checkups. This dude was dealing with a lot of family medical shit. Now move on. The empty category is no passive pipe dream. It is an active shaping force in the making of events. There are not as many hardline brass tack qualifications to the mirroring procedure to be outlined in this book as one might think. For instance, the Hindu undergoes a transformation of mind that temporarily bypasses the ordinary cause-effect relationship, even those we must have for the kind of world we know. Seized by his god and change, the Hindu can walk with impunity through pits of white-hot charcoal that will melt aluminum on contact. Recently, in our own country, hypnotically induced trance states have replaced chemical anesthesias, allowing bloodless, painless, quickly healing operations to be performed. These are mutations in the metaphoric fabric of our semantic universe. As Levi Strauss has called our world built world. Uh-oh. The cult seized these novelties previously and, in their longing for magic, alluded to shadowy cosmic mysteries. Rather, trance states proved to be forms of metonia, temporary restructurings of reality orientation. Some fundamental restructuring of mind underlies all disciplines and pursuits. Mathematician and physicists follow the same mirroring of idea and fact, just on a wider scope, from a different set of metaphors, a different set of expectancies, from a different aesthetic. Oh yeah. Here we are. My neighbor was seized and changed somewhere in his final year of doctoral studies in topology. The structure of his mind and his resulting world were never again the same as that of a non-mathematician. He lived in a world of mathematical spaces. He loved to figure the spaces of knots, the kind you tie, though I could not relate marvelous figurines to my shoelace world. He tried to show me in beautifully diagrammed hieroglyphics how he could remove an egg from an intact shell through mathematical force space. In my naive concreteness, frustrated that I had no ears to hear or eyes to see, I wanted him to apply his force-space miracle to a common hen's egg. But my friend's world was cerebral. His eggs, those rare cosmic ones found in the inner land of thoughts. Frustration at my blindness is as great as my own. There is an eloquent madness in topology. But from that strange brotherhood of abstractions, lunar modules have been built. Okay. Might be a little out there, but we got to the moon, yeah? From their forced space absurdities have come real ships for spaces other than our own. Mythos, the language of fantasy. Fact. This is David Bohm computed the zero-point energy, quantum mechanical fluctuations, single cubic space, and arrived at the energy of this, 1 cubic centimeter space, next to nothing at all. Yet, Bohm translates his ergs into the energy equivalent, about 10 billion tons of uranium. Sounds like a lot. There's a lot of fireworks that come from nothing at all. It was proposed once that if you had the faith of a grain of mustard seed, you could say to the mountain, be removed to the sea, and it would be. It's a pretty similar proposal to physicists. Yep. That's strange. Rome wrote that under present conditions, this energy he hypothesized is inaccessible. But as conditions change, we will get our hands on some of it. The techniques of getting will reside in the remote recesses of those minds seized by Bohm's kind of faith. When finally brought about, that enormous energy will be hailed as discovery of nature's secrets. It will have been instead the filling by life of an empty category. It's not just that nature is abhors a vacuum. It will be an example of the way it turned in love with the productions of time, as William Blake put it. Oh yeah. Let's get it. Physicist Gerald Feinberg frets at a universe where Einstein's light speed is the maximum allowed for a reality. So Feinberg has substituted imaginary numbers for Einstein's real ones, created a limitation involved. Professor F sees no way of repealing Einstein's law, so tries to use the whole abstraction against itself for a new era of freedom. At least freedom for imaginative thinking. Dr. F has been seized too and no longer lives in a world of common breakfast and eggs. Look. Sorry about that. Okay. Alright, let's pick up where we left off. Once found, the rest of us will then presume that God built tachyons into the universe way back there. We've automatically assumed that about atoms, molecules, and the rest of our new marvels. Who would doubt these were prior facts, awaiting discovery by a slowly awakening man? Nevertheless, the assumption has outlived its usefulness. Probably the most basic fact, we accept too self-evident, even to dwell on as an question. See if I can. Right here. Hope it's too loud. We should be able to hear it. Idiot. I'm supposed to read this. Control Alt. I don't think you were able to hear it. It's cool. I'll read it out. Cool. Go back to it. Here we go. First comes the world of Kabbalistic sign, the representation of possibility in a way that can be believed by a brotherhood of believers. After that comes the discovery. Relation of fact and idea is not quite magic. It's not quite of the same reality as Hanteg's either. Rather, thinking is a shaping force in reality. William Blake claimed that anything capable of being believed is an image of truth. Our capacity for belief is highly conditioned, however, truth always proves to be a synthesis of current possibility. Usabe. Dr. F, frustrated by the limits of the Einstein universe, nevertheless no other materials to work with, certainly not appears to be the business. Fear idea of great speed comes about only with that metaphoric framework resulting in Einstein. Any possibilities beyond Einstein's restriction exist only because of the necessary definitions of the system itself. Alright, our imaginations cannot set out to find the cracks in the cosmic egg until someone lays the egg. Boom! New representations for reality, new ideas, new fabrications of fantasy searching for supporting logic. Thus proceed the final discovery by which verification of the notion is achieved. It has been claimed that our minds screen out far more than we accept, else we would live in a world of chaos. Our screening process may be essential, but it is also arbitrary and changeable. We pick and choose, ignore or magnify, illuminate or dampen, expand upon or obscure, affirm or deny, as our inheritance, adopted discipline, or passionate pursuit dictate. This would be a dope track. At root is an aesthetic response, and we invest our aesthetic responses with sacred overtones. I may need to keep it down. It's getting late, oh baby, gotta keep it down. Value, as Whitehead said. Limitation involves faith. Faith that an exclusive interest is worth a life investment, worth the sacrifice of every other possibility. I like to think of our open-ended potential, but potential is always limited to the sum total of the images conjured up by the mind. And this ties us down immediately. Synthesis of things already realized. Although, as we will find later, with the sorcerer Don Juan, such synthesis can grow exponentially like a tree at every tip. Among the potentials of resynthesis of our current reality, one possibility must be selected. heard, as a question one might answer, goal one might achieve. Every choice involves such a commitment. Once we have made an investment and corresponding sacrifice of other possibilities, our life is at stake. Yo, Professor F has made such a choice and risked his professional life on the possibilities that his tachyons might come about. The excluded possibilities will act as counterpoints of discord until this notion sufficiently reorients the concepts of this brotherhood. Then the overall selectivity will rule out the contradictory notions altogether, and for a generation or two or more, the new discovery might shape reality until replaced in turn. Most people respond automatically to their given circle of representation, strengthened by their unconscious allegiance. Since their cultural circle is made of many conflicting drives for their allegiance, their lives are fragmented and ambiguous. To be converted is to be seized by an idea that orients us around a single focal point of possibility. The point of focus groups into orderly sequence the myriad necessities for choice we face continually. Given a central thesis for orientation on the energies and interests of personal or group life can reinforce and amplify each other, rather than now here, now there attempts to tend. Shit. It's hard to read. The power of Freudian thought was in its metaphoric simplicity. A few dramatic images stabilized and organized all the data of a world in flux. Its simplicity made it readily available to anyone for whom the imagery would aesthetically satisfy. Hans Sachs read Freud's interpretation of dream and found in it the one thing worth living for. Was caught up in an imagery by which he too could interpret the universe and give it meaning. Was seized by the material he had seized and saw his life as meaningful in serving the new construct. Centering of mind fills a person with power and conviction. It creates mathematicians, saints, or Nazis with equal and impartial ease. Okay, moving on. A mind divided by choices confused by alternatives is a mind robbed of power. The body reflects this. Ooh, shit. Boy, don't it. The ambiguous person is a machine out of phase, working against itself and tearing itself up. That person is an engine with sand in its crankcase, broken piston rods, water in its fuel lines. In spite of great effort and noise, nothing much happens. Its own, yeah. Tunes the engine, gets it running on all cylinders, functioning with power and efficiency. The version is like a laser. It centers the diffusing and fragmented energy into a tight, potent focus. But where the beam goes, the direction it takes, while germane to its structure, is incidental to the function. This questions those religious justifications each system inwardly grants itself in struggle for superiority among conflicting and competing drives. Yet the nature of the imagery by which any conversion occurs, if incidental to the process, closely related to the product. Direction and end will always be in keeping with the centered notion by which the organization takes place. The end is in the beginning. Heaven or hell is contained in the choice for center, not in a function of centering. Single-minded devotion to any point tends to give power for that point's use. All gods are jealous, but all are equally productive if they can take over completely and run the machine. Newtonia restructures to varying degrees and for varying lengths of time those basic representations of reality inherited from the past. On those representations, we base our notions, concepts of what is real. In turn, our notions of what is real direct our perceptual apparatus, that network of senses that tells us what we feel, hear, see, so on. This is not a simple subjective maneuver, but a reality-shaping procedure. We are taught to believe that only the out there is real. We are taught to consider our perception of reality to be transient, accidental, insignificant, arising from and oriented only to economic biological necessity. Fuck. This becomes an enormous inner contradiction, as Jung would call it. Splitting our reality in half, the inner conflict is reflected outwardly, and the world happens to us as fate. We look on archetypal worldviews, those held by primitive tribes, consider them archaic survival mechanisms. We have been taught that the real out there has been seen only dimly before, but with a progressively more realistic, aware HD. Good old Levi Strauss, the French anthropologist, challenges our smug chauvinism. He claims that archaic thought patterns were highly disciplined intellectual structure, designed to give the world a coherence, shape, and it is in fact just what all worldviews. Primitive man sacralized his intellectual structure no more than we do ours. Neither system is any more true than the other. Ours is more aesthetic ally desirable to us, but is brought at the same price all selective systems are. Price of those possibilities sacrificed to keep a limited structure intact. The difference between Einstein's relative universe and a dreamtime cosmology of the Australian Aborigine is not a matter of truth or falsehood, realism or illusion, progression or regression, intelligence or stupidity, as the naive realists have claimed. It is a matter of aesthetic choice. Each system produces results unobtainable to the other. Each is closed. Elusive. Robert Frost saw civilization as a small clearing in a great forest. We have hewn for space at no small cost. And a dog out there seems ever ready to close in again. Collapse into chaos should be our ideation fail. In his book, he will consider Frost dealing to be disciplines of mind: reality-adjusted thinking, reason, logic, civilization, society, culture. I shall consider the dark forest to be the primal stuff, conscious, the unknown potential, perhaps just an empty category. Next chapter, we're going to define the psychological term autistic thinking and refer to it as the borderline between clearing and forest. Then we will try to outline the interaction between these aspects of the reality function. Our archaic background was concerned with keeping stable our small clearing in the forest. Our clearing is a worldview, a cosmic egg structured by the mind's drive or logical ordering of its universe. The clearing is an organization imposed by us on a random possibility. It is a circle of reason born from meaninglessness. Each person is a potential line capable of breaking through the circle of reason. Yet the circle is an accomplishment of no small order. An enormous force bends all lines into circles. Each new mind threatens the structure, but ageism pressure weigh on the infant to win from him agreement with modification to and help in sustaining his cultural circle. Let's go. Each new mind threatens the structure. End of lecture. TDC saw human destiny spreading their life called small clearing out into the dark beyond. In archaic times, we feared lest the dark engulf our fragile construction of reason, and all actions were oriented toward keeping the cultural circle intact. Hard and a new nominalist of physics speak with a new and bold confidence that dares move beyond stability. We have been passionately involved in strengthening our ideation, cataloging, and indexing our clearing in the forest. Some unanimity of opinion has begun to form. The nature of the dark forest is the real problem. For our attitude toward the forest influences sharply the way we look upon our clearing and affects the kind of new clearing we can make. Platonists and Stoics have always assumed the forest to be ready planted. Corresponding ideas of what was out there were planted also in our minds, leading us by heuristic devices until we finally stumbled our way to various discoveries and conclusions. The gods and fates looked on, rather as we could watch rats in a maze. Consider, however, that the kind of trees we succeed in felling at the clearing's edge need not have always been. Indeed, there may be no trees at all in the depths of that dark. Rather, the forest may be shaped. Trees may grow according to the kind of light our reason grows. Homie, have you ever sang to plants? Have you ever talked to plants? Scientists speak of the dark forest of nature as essentially simple. Nature's category. However, a label, concept shot through and through with man's thought. And man's thought is designed to simplify from an endless possibility. Scientists are never really talking about the unknown nature of the forest beyond their circle of reason and logic. They talk about their garden within it, the forest converted, the trees labeled, the plants and shrubs cataloged, selected, arranged in orderly patterns. When the scientists look at the forest, they look for additions to their garden, and they look with a gardener's eye. Ooh, harsh. Right, that's harsh. The nature discovered is determined to an indeterminable degree by the mind that sets out to discover. We can never know the full extent that we play in its reality formation. It will never be computable or reducible to formula. An ultimately serious commitment of mind, however, can be the determinant in any issue, overriding randomness and chance. In the following chapters, I hope by showing what I have found about this reality play, to suggest a way by which we may take a more active part in shaping our events. Let's in the opening chapter, we've gone a rough survey of the kinds of questions and the kinds of answers I will deal with the rest of the book. Our clearing in the forest is all there appears for us to go on. The game is ours. The high priest of the disciplines controlling our cultural circle try to tell us that logic and reason are the sum total of things, Or, if more is possible, that it is only so through their controls, which are their own logical rules. Logic and reason are surely the stuff of which the claiming is made, and the high point of life's thrust. Yet, these techniques of mind tend to become destructive and to trap us in deadlocks of despair. Logic and reason are like the tip of an iceberg. The naive realist, the biogenetic physiologist, the rats in a maze watchers claim the tip is all there is. You're gonna make me say it. Yet, life becomes demonic when sentenced to so small an area. There are times when we need to open the threshold of mind to that unknown subterranean depth, and we always need to believe in its existence. And so, though our cosmic egg is the only reality we have, and is not to be treated lightly, what he hopes to show that there is available to us a crack in this egg. That there are times when the shell no longer protects but suffocates and destroys. The mirroring of mind and reality finds its best expression in a comment by Jesus de Cristo, almost universally ignored. Those who claim to have heard him insist that supplication is the way out. They cry that we should look to heaven for answers. But Jesus de Cristo, that harsh realist, recognized the play of mirrors and pointed out that what you lose on earth is lost in heaven. Ooh. Alright. We made it to chapter 2. I'm glad I skipped the introduction, man. This chapter 1 was already kind of like another introduction. Valves, solvents. Where we at? Where we at? Nice. Alright, yo, what I'm gonna do, take me a BRB. I'll be right back. I'm gonna continue reading this book. Discord fam, I'm gonna go ahead, pop in here real quick. Yeah, let's go. You know, this right here is my homie. I've known this homie since like, oh, damn, I've known you 20 years, bruh. That shit's crazy, dude. Alright, I'm gonna hit you up. I want to take my break, Twitch. Twitch fam, yo. Hold up. Let me go back to the book first. Whatever. I'll be right back. Give me a few minutes. I'll be right back. We're going to do more reading and see what we can learn and take from it, okay? Peace.
at-bats.
Cheers. We are reading The Crack in the Cosmic Egg. Book is available in chat as well as Speaker's Realm in the Discord chat. After I get off of Twitch, in the cinema in the Burrow Bay Discord, we're going to be doing Grindhouse. We got Screwballs. We got Shadow Zone. We have Haunted House on Sorority Row. We have Repossessed. And we have Dolls. I run movies until an hour or two after I wake up. I try to keep it 5 different movies every night. We already got a couple suggestions in the Grindhouse channel. As the server grows, we're going to open it up to additional watch parties. Anime, whatever you want to call it. We'll see. Anyways, get out of here. Back into the keep. All right. Let's get the book loaded up. Discord link if you need it. Okay. The lurkers, this is going to be for you. What do we do here? Let's do a jiggle. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. Whoa, whoa. Oh, ha, ha. Okay, back to the book. Chapter 2, Vows and Solvents. Our clearing in the forest is the form by which content is shaped, a content which in turn helps determine the form of the clearing. Our clearing is ancient, archetypal, of infinitely contingent formative lines, but there are experiences in which a crack forms in this egg when non-ordinary things are possible, or non-ordinary solutions occur to mind. This crack formation leads reality formation and involves an exploration or modes of thinking. We need a broader look at mind than the biogenetically indoctrinated physiologists give it. We are aware of our reality-adjusted thinking, our ordinary, socially oriented, logical, rational thinking. We are less aware of another mode of thinking, which we are continually but more peripherally involved. Little too much. Odin, discovering the secret spring of wisdom and poetry, asked the guardian of the spring for a drink. Was told, the price is your right eye. Jerome Bruner writes of thinking for the left hand. Michael Polanyi wrote of a primary process thinking that is typical of the thinking of children and animals. Psychologists refer to autistic thinking, and it is the last term that I have found most descriptive of and useful, talking about the shadow side of thinking. Autistic thinking, or A-thinking, is an unstructured, non-logical, but not necessarily illogical, whimsical thinking that is the key to creativity. Okay. It involves unconscious processes, but is not necessarily unconscious. Autistic thinking is indulged in, or in some cases happens to one, in ordinary conscious states. The autistic is a kind of dream world mode of thinking. This left-handed thinking is nevertheless a functional part of reality formation. It is the connecting link between our clearing and forest. It is the pearl of great price, the way by which potential unfolds. Later, I will suggest how this primary process of mind is structured and modified into an adult world view. The structuring process that we call maturing is a modifying procedure that represses and largely eliminates. Whoa! Let's reread that. This structuring process that we call maturing is a modifying procedure that represses and largely eliminates. By the very act of maturation, open-ended potential which thinking encompasses. Michael Polanyi wrote that creative thinking as a child with the tools of logical structuring given by maturity. This is the key. Most logical structuring is bought at the price of this child thinking. There remains a certain faintness, a childlike quality in all great creative people. Them, somehow, thread remains intact between their modes of thoughts. It is a return to this primary process of thinking which brings about metonia, version, illumination of creative thinking, seizure by the gods which meant to allow firewalk, the transfer of hypnotism, allows non-ordinary structurings of events and so on. Okay, I'm going to bring this closer. It was this re-entrance into primary process thinking by the adult, matured, reality-adjusted mind that brought about G's structuring process by which the world is born and shaped anew in the mind is the way by which the mind, this world may be reborn and reshaped. Whether this re-entry and reshaping process gives the kingdom of heaven the illumination of E equals MC squared, or the double helix postulate as an empty category to be eventually filled with content, is incidental to the process. All livings raise the flower. There is no logical, rational, destructured criterion out there with a divine plan. There is no truth out there which our weak minds or souls eventually run across. There is this casual, haphazard, amoral process that leaves logical gaps and brings about newness. And the procedure's only demand is that given talents be invested, risked, doubled. The possibilities, Lord. Explore possibilities. I'm digging it. Worldview development in a child modifies his primary process thinking. That archetypal mode that melts out into a continuum. This structuring modifies, but also gives the child's world to be a form in which, and only in which growth, expansion, possibility can unfold. Worldview development limits and thwarts, but there is no other way to have a world to view. Newtonia changes to varying extents. This fundamental structure built since infancy. Change of concept is brought about by retracing of the original formative process of worldview development and reshaping of the concepts originally formed. When the postulate arrives out of the blue and a person suddenly sees a long-desired answer to a problem, when illumination or understanding is suddenly achieved, this reformation process takes place in relation to specific possibility. All creative mental phenomena involve this autistic thinking and follow a similar pattern of development in the mind. All such phenomena are reality influencing or capable of influencing reality. In each case, there is a change of concept that changes some aspect of the worldview. This is a new seeing, which itself may eventually bring about new things to be within broad, statistical mode of reality adjusted thinking. If you're still here, kudos to you for keeping up. Sabotage. We're on 18. Shit. Holy shit. We got a ways to go just for chapter 2. We shall continue in just a moment. Toke. All right. Give me one second. One cannot induce creative autistic thinking ad lib, however, is bought at a price. The creative aspect of A thinking is not controllable. It cannot be duplicated by a computer. Or the autistic mode adds something not in the given context. There is a catalytic quality in A thinking that gives more than a sum of the parts, suggesting and bringing about the new possibility. yeah. Where we at? Come on, homie. 58%. We're good. Autistic thinking can only be defined in a roundabout way. Right here. For instance, a pianist friend told me of the following experience, the most impressive of his life. Favorite work, one he had lived with for years, was Mozart's Last Sonata, K576, the one written after the composer's late discovery of Bach. My friend was giving a concert one evening and was scheduled to play this sonata. Just before commencing, he leaned back for a moment to sense the mood of that contrapuntal texture, and was struck anew by its exquisiteness and his love for it. At that moment, in a single frozen instant out of time, he experienced the sonata. It happened to him. Rather as Suzanne Langer's volume-filled time, every note, phrase, nuance, shadow, and line formed in an ethereal circle of perfection for him. He described it as a volume, a sort of universal whole, perfect, far more than human, happening to him as something unique and totally outside of himself. Though it had occupied only a second, the occurrence was immeasurable by any kind of time, and was numinous and profound. This autistic experience, a kind of aesthetic illumination, gives the pattern of all creative formation. Even my own small illumination, which triggered the search leading to the book, happened in this way. I'd spent more than 2 years reading, corresponding, thinking, struggling with the relation of thought and reality in general, with the Mechanics Mettonia in particular, for a form of this had dramatically altered my own life. One day, following an exciting connection of ideas that unfolded over several weeks, tantalizing close to yelling, I grew stale and unable to go further. I went out to relax with my children and dutifully climbed an apple tree at their insistence that it gave a lovely view. And there, in my own little suspended moment out of my mind, I saw the connecting link between the fragmented parts of my search fused. There was a great wash of understanding, powerful and total. I had my answer. Nothing was specific or articulate. It just was, in a perfectly clear concept ultimate. The answer seemed utterly remote from my thinking, however, far larger than the sum total of my insignificant bits of material gathered over the years, and far exceeding the scope of my own idea, capacity, thought. I knew the translating of that experience and making or articulate, structuring the logical shape would involve me for a long. Let me add now that in my experience, what was understood to be the answer was the very function by which I had achieved my seeing. Here. Come on. My answer was a turning in on the process of, that is, the answer to my passionate pursuit was insight to how the answers to passionate questions are formed in the mind. I saw that this was but an extension of the very ontological function by which things were. I saw that this was the way the empty category of science was shaped and filled. For me, no universal out there truth was given. Rather, I saw that the only truth for us is the process of questioning what truth might be and receiving answers in keeping with the nature of our question. We'll return to this question in the future in some detail. For now, I want to explore the state of mind involved in a moment of answer itself. The state is brought on by a chance suspension of ordinary thinking, following a rigorous exercise of normal logic. Both Sonata and Apple Tree experiences show how the mode breaks into mind. Right. Oh, it's my baby. Alright, let's move on. An unconscious synthesis is involved in the formation of desire and experience. Unconscious, though, carries too many limiting connotations. For instance, imagination, creating images not present to the senses. Surely one of the active ingredients of creative thinking, and the prime ingredient of the empty category. But imagination is our conscious play with potential, unhampered with modifications or adjustments to other things or other thinkers. A sonata-type experience, or apple tree illumination, a finally arriving scientific eureka, or for that matter, homogamous, women are monogamous, etc. This guy's rambling. Yet it should not be overlooked that the great postulate illumination answer happens only to a mind that has been deeply immersed in the proper materials for its genesis. The eureka arrives out of the blue, from a well-prepared and well-primed one. Spirit bloweth where it listeth. But inevitably, the direction it finally takes is determined by hard work and true commitment. A thinking then refers to an autonomous, self-contained kind of thinking that makes no adjustment to the world of other thinkers. But it must have its materials from this other source. A thinking includes conscious imagination, and apparently unconscious processes, so offers a label for a wide range of similar. If you ever spent a day in some rare new venture, picking wild strawberries, and that night, as you start to drift to sleep, found yourself suddenly looking at the most real strawberries of your life. In fact, they are more than real. They're the most fragrant, beautiful green leaves, red fruited berries conceivable to mind, occurring in a vital, essential immediacy more real than any occurrence of your life. Consider the similarity between strawberry hypnobori, my friend's Mozart sonata, and my apple tree experience. We'll see the basic outline by which life moves randomly from possibility to possibility. This kind of thinking acts on some exceptional dramatic emotion, ultimate, serious, or repetitive involvement from the experience. Emphasizes this into something larger and more perfect than the original. Then the autistic synthesis breaks into the mind at some odd off-guard moment when the logical processes have been suspended. The autistic mode then presents a streamlined, utterly superior version of something larger than life and unavailable to previously accepted logical manipulation. Hans here wrote that Hans wrote that every really important scientific idea he knew of had occurred in the twilight moments between sleep and waking. That state called hypnagogic, point to which I will return. do it.
Joseph Chilton Pierce. Forward by Tom Hartman. All of One Crack for Classic is edition of the crack in the Cosmic Egg. Classics
What
in
kind of crack
addition.
is this guy doing? Hold up.
Could the reality of this state be different from the reality of ordinary thinking? And if so,
Look at that, Brad. Go here.
dream state
Go up.
state and directed by conscious desire and volition. The erotic dream is occasionally a form of this.
Oh,
The
my
little
goodness.
lizard divination rite of the Yaqui Indian sorcerer, Don Juan, of whom more later, created a form of this empty category, and the divination would answer the first question asked. It would succeed, however, only if the question were presented without confusion or ambiguity. Paul Tillich wrote that the hidden
Nice.
content of prayer was always the decisive factor, which is another expression of the same function, and a point to which I will return. The real assumption of our underlying beliefs is the determinant in our lives. Surface verbal plays of mind are often only forms of wishful thinking posited against the deep strata of a belief to the contrary. But the deep strata are the determinant in the reality event because of the non-ambiguous nature of this level of thought. Jesus' prayer in the secret place refers to this level of certainty
that underlies all the contingencies of any reality. Ambiguous confusion, lack of an ultimate desire or basic motivation, fragments and dissolves the autistic hypnagogic possibilities
I like
should
that.
they occur to a person's mind. 7 centuries ago, Roger Bacon recognized that mathematics would be the gateway to the sciences. This is because of the non-ambiguous nature of mathematics, an idea that can be
Expressed mathematically is one that can be represented unambiguously, and anything which can be represented and believed in non-ambiguously tends to be expressed in reality. Mathematics
serves as a projection device giving objective certainty, just as the god Kataragama does for the Hindu, for
Let's
instance.
do Ava.
The Tibetan yoga spends years developing a state of mind
that bears, from written reports, direct relation to the hypnagogic.
No.
Hypnagogic. The yoga cultivated, practiced, and finally entered into the potential of his autistic mode of thinking. The state he brought about was a subset of his ordinary reality, organized along specific and controlled lines, as found in hypnotism. By a subset, I mean that he drew on his background experience in selective ways, setting up a world within a world, the equivalent of a concretized dream state under direct conscious control. Later, the similarities between this Hindu activity and the path of knowledge outlined by the sorcerer, Don Juan, will become apparent. One yogic activity was the production of a tulpa, a phantasm, or imaginary person. The production was a slow development which could itself only be undertaken in a mature stage of training. Eventually, the tulpa creation would begin to form and take on aspects of reality for the subject creator. Fleeting glimpses, peripheral and insubstantial, would become more stable until a full and permanent image could be brought to focus. A tulpa became responsive to speech and the whole sensory range of the subject. Tulpas developed definite personality traits and full capacities for ordinary human response. Occasionally, a
That's
tulpa
crazy.
would take on strong enough reality aspects to be glimpsed by other people who had no knowledge of the production project itself. Tulpas were known to display the same passionate adherences to their developed personalities as would a real person, bringing to mind the strange tenacity of the personality, Eve Black, in Thigpen's case of the 3 faces of Eve. The Tibetan monk used this technique to create a form of the local goddess, voluptuous creature, as a consort with whom connubial bliss could be indulged at whim. This might seem only a cultic freak of subjectivity, but several aspects of it are indicative of both metanoia, that creates physicists from students, and the eureka postulate, that brings about reality-changing concepts and discoveries. First, the process of mind takes its idea and its material from the real world. The goddess is a well-established and familiar part of the culture. Further, experience with a real woman must be undergone by the novice, followed by a complete mastery of all sexual desire.
Oh, wow.
That is, the novice not only experiences a real woman, he then must gain complete mental control over his actual glandular reactions, and it is a medical fact that the yoga can control all old brain autonomous activities, such as heartbeat, body heat, glandular output, and so on, as well as psychological reactions, until he can turn desire on or off at will, without ambiguous double thinking.
Get out.
These are the given materials, then, that are acted upon by the catalyzing synthesis within the autistic mode of thinking. The materials are synthesized and given back to ordinary thinking in a unified image, larger and greater than life. True to all autistic creations, the goddess achieved proves superior to frail woman, though some plain Tibetan girl was part of the raw material for the divine synthesis. To achieve a state of non-ambiguity is the final goal of yogic training. Then when a specific desire is singled out, as for instance tulpa creation, the attention of mind, the passionate pursuit, brings about a slow metanoia of the necessary concepts, transforming them to direct the percepts in the needed ways. Finally, the yoga senses respond according to the dictates of his editorial hierarchy of mind, and the goddess materializes and becomes real for him. The superiority of autistic creations suggests an additive unavailable from the ordinary ambiguous processes of mind. Autistic thinking can apparently synthesize out of the sum total of the context of the ultimate desire triggering the process. But it also adds that maddening quality of perfection, larger and more real than any of the elements triggering background. The autistic experience felt a wholeness that lies beyond all mundane reality, a numinous quality that makes us feel we have received lightning from the hand of God.
Lightning from the hand of God.
There are other ramifications of autistic thinking. In our town lived a child called autistic by the psychologist. For some reason, ordinary reality adjustments were never made by the child. At age 7, she could perform prodigious intellectual feats whenever the world was randomly tuned in. Certain blocks seemed operative. Tight channelings allowed in only a few selected perceptions. Perhaps the rewards of reality adjustment, with its self-modification, demands for choice, exclusion of other potential, damping of archaic thought processes, risk of self to a world of other selves, and so on, were never as strong for her as the lure of the autonomous.
One sec. I like to read out loud, it's nice.
Autonomous, inner synthesis. Perhaps the bits and pieces of reality.
Hold up. There, you should be able to see it better.
Reality perceived were put together in a free synthesis similar to a yogic wonderland, though a frightful construct is apparently more often the case with these unfortunates. My own small son gave insight into autistic reality tensions. For his birthday, he was given a vicious little soldier doll, complete with scarred face, movable limbs, and murderous paraphernalia of war. It captivated my boy. For close to 2 years, he was absorbed with the G.I. Joe and played with nothing else. One summer day, he became even more fey than usual, withdrawn, far away, and quiet. He ate little, looking at us with the strange, pitying look of one possessed of universal secrets. He would not leave the house, but sat quietly with his soldier doll, no longer playing or speaking. The spell lasted 4 days, when he was suddenly himself again. Later, he voluntarily, if haltingly, explained to me why he had been so rude those 4 days. It had occurred to him, in a burst of insight, that his G.I. Joe could become alive for him, as he had passionately wished and daydreamed about so long, and that they could play together forever and ever. But,
That's creepy. Okay.
and here he groped his way carefully, G.I. Joe would have been alive only for him, not for
24.
anyone else. And then he, my son, could no longer have been a part of us, his family, or take part in things we did.
What?
The issues were clear-cut, equally real, and equally
Crazy.
rewarding. His decision had been no light thing, weighed those silent days. Why we happened to win, I will never know. Perhaps we rather lost. Life should be a venture of liberty, with a safe harbor for return. Perhaps my son would only have entered on an adventurous path, as Don Juan the Sorcerer might say, and probably that path might have been traversed more freely than we can imagine. Ronald Lang, the Scotch psychiatrist, would have understood and sympathized with my boy. Lang knows the social structure to be every bit as much as exercise and madness as these opposites. He considers escape from our world a fairly rational maneuver, if rather an exchange of chains.
Oh, wow.
Back to the
Interesting.
autistic procedures. A-thinking is not reality adjusted, and so not hinged about by modifications to what can and cannot be true. Children distinguish from an early age that certain experiences are considered unreal by their superiors, since eliciting either no adult responsive verification or a negative adult response. This is mere arbitrariness to a child, however, not an absolute. A child's world is quasi-hallucinatory, as Smithies calls it, though nonetheless real for that. Only little by little does a child adopt criteria for true-false in keeping with the relationship of parents and society. He does this as the rewards from and demands by that relationship grow. Piaget considers early adolescence the breakpoint for a new psychological stage and the full development of logic. It is not just fortuitous that this coincides with a growing peer group demand for other-directedness, culminating in that absolutely other demand, sexuality. Autistic thinking is self-contained. It operates beyond the restrictions and modifications of a world. That is why this kind of thinking can make an unlimited synthesis of experience.
Okay.
Anything is true in A-thinking. Any of its constructions are universals, or cosmic truths. It is just this capacity, still operating in the adult mind, even though only peripherally and unconsciously, that creates the postulate arriving full-blown in the brain. The Eureka. Illumination is unavailable to the constructions of logical thought,
Eureka.
but dependent on the machinations of logical thought with its selective screening. Logical thought operates by limitation, selecting from potential some specific isolated desire. The autistic is a continuum, an everything, and so
everything.
nothing. A
Nothing.
conscious desire held to passionately or ultimate. Surely, we must be selective. Surely we do not casually choose what makes up our current criteria for our
Bet. Everything and so nothing.
considers early adolescence the breakpoint for a new psychological stage and the full development of logic.
We
It is
are up
not
here.
just fortuitous that this coincides with a growing peer group demand for other-directedness, culminating in that absolutely other demand, sexuality.
Sexuality.
Autistic thinking is self-contained. It operates beyond the restrictions and modifications of a world. That is why this kind of thinking can make an unlimited synthesis of experience. Anything is true in A-thinking.
Okay.
Any of its constructions are universals, or cosmic truths. It is just this capacity, still operating in the adult mind, even though only peripherally and unconsciously, that creates the postulate arriving full-blown in the brain. The Eureka. Illumination is unavailable to the constructions of logical thought, but dependent on the machinations of logical thought with its selective screening. Logical thought operates by limitation, selecting from potential some specific isolated desire. The autistic is a continuum, an everything and so nothing. A conscious desire held to passionately or ultimately until it excludes other ideas that would inhibit it, thus takes on the characteristics of autistic non-ambiguity and furnishes a point of focus for this autistic capacity. The autistic can synthesize this desire into a unified postulate or answer relating far beyond the limited materials of the triggering passion. The given postulate can, in turn, change worldviews and worlds to view. The free synthesis capacity of A-thinking, able to draw on the continuum of reality experience and potential as it does, is what gives all really new ideas their initial element of foolishness, as Whitehead wrote of all genuinely new notions. Consider, for instance, David Bohm and all those billions of tons of energy from a cubic centimeter of nothing at all, or Jesus moving those mountains with the faith of a grain of mustard seed. Piaget felt that autistic thinking corresponded with primitive psychological causality, implying magic. Belief that any desire whatsoever can influence objects, the belief in the obedience of external things.
Hold up.
Surely, we must be selective. Surely we do not casually choose what makes up our current criteria for our irreducible and stubborn facts so longed for by the realists. These facts are our given worldview, and to question them is to threaten our ideation with collapse into chaos. Yet, logical truth and
Hold on.
And objective existence are variables formed by cultural agreement. These facts change, much as fashions change, though to each generation they represent reality as it must then be. We represent change as our own emerging from the dark and foolish superstitions of the past and the coming into the light of a final, true, and really modern understanding. Each age proclaims itself the ars nova and scorns the ars antiqua. Each man believes, as did Erasmus, that the world is just coming awake from a long sleep. Generation by generation we proclaim ourselves the Enlightenment. Each age delights in signing a new requiem to its fathers. As we change our inherited representation of the world we deal with changes accordingly. Percepts that constitute the world in which we move, and there is no other percepts that Hoffer and Osman's notion of an innocent, unshielded view of the universe proved no more fruitful. So long as a thinking ego center exists.
I see how this works. Hold up. Let me zoom in. Boom.
Exists, its fundamental assumptions are a determinant in the experienced universe itself. Stripping off the acquired interests of our worldview does not lead to a true universe. Our acquisitions, as Hoffer and Osman call them, are the very concepts directing them. 26. Percepts that constitute the world in which we move, and there is no other world for us. We cannot free ourselves of our clearing in the forest and plunge out into the dark and find truth. If our acquired interests are a cloak that can be shed, we would immediately have to weave another, equally arbitrary garb. There is, in this sense, no going naked in the world. Brunner of Harvard tells of studies in perception that have identified over 7 million different shades of color between which we can differentiate. We categorize the spectrum into about a dozen groups or families. This makes a practical, limited representation which we can respond to easily, talk about handily, and think.
Hold up. 7 million different shades of color. 7 million. I'm just a beginner at Photoshop, so, holy fuck. I'm just shocked, you know what I'm saying? If I were to guess the amount of colors, I didn't think like 7 million. Wow.
Think about coherently. The spectrum of light as itself might be analogous to the continuum of autistic thinking, lying free and untrammeled outside all categories.
Okay.
A handful of primary colors represent the defining disciplines of social thinking,
Right.
our logic and objective reason. We impose our categories on what we see in order to see. We see through the prism of our categories. The worldview we inherit has been built up by putting things into objective pigeonholes like this, categories that can be shared. The psychedelic may fracture these structures. Under LSD, for instance, the categories of color, by which we help organize our field of visual possibility, may be dissolved. Then colors may merge, flow together, and not stay put. Faces may suddenly drip and run across the floor. Shapes may become fluid and mixing. However, to shatter our working models of the universe does not lead to truth, any kind of new data, or, above all, a true picture of the universe. The universe, like nature, is a conceptual framework that changes from culture to culture and age to age. Our concepts are to some extent arbitrary constructs, but to disrupt or dissolve them with drugs does not free us into some universal knowledge out there in the great beyond. There is, instead, the loss of meaningful structures of agreement needed for communion with others. This can lead to the loss of personality definition itself, that which Don Juan meant by loss of soul, or Jesus meant by the outer darkness. This freedom from false concepts notion is but a recurrence of the old Garden of Eden myth, the noble savage, return to nature nonsense of the Romantics. Any worldview is a creative tension between possibility and choice. This is the tension that holds community and real world together. This is the cohesive force of our own center of awareness, the thin line between loss of self to autistic dissolution on the one hand, or slavery to the broad statistics of the world on the other. Perceptions relieved of this natural tension through drugs or the various occult religious techniques may well be profound or frightfully chaotic. Price, in his preface to Carrington's book, Matter, Mind, and Meaning, discusses the physiological phenomenon of ideomotor action. It has been found that an idea or response tends to fulfill itself or execute itself automatically through the muscular apparatus of the body, and will do so unless other ideas are present to inhibit it. Price suggests that this is indicative of a wider operation in life, namely, that all ideas have a tendency to realize themselves in the material world in any way they can, unless inhibited by other ideas. This Price-Carrington notion will be borne out, I believe, in the exploration taking place here in my book. Solly and Murphy spoke of us as immersed in a sea of stimuli, all striving for dominance within us. We are not so easily impinged upon by things, however, and the system of reality growing from our given stimuli is far more dynamic. The striving tensions are those of ideas, or ways for grouping this sea of stimuli. Surely a basic stimulus is given us, but each culture, discipline, or ideology strives for dominance as the prism through which this stimulus will be ordered into a coherent, shared world. This fragmented striving is the charismatic curse of reason that drives us from innocence to experience, from circle to circle. The more thoroughly we search out our past, the more embracing and sweeping we find this cosmic egg structuring to have always been, even in the most archaic of cultures. 27. Aldous Huxley considered our consciousness but a segment of a larger one. Normal consciousness is that which has been funneled through the reducing valve of brain, nervous system, and sense organs. This protects us, Huxley believed, from being overwhelmed on the surface of the planet. Through drugs or the various mental cult systems, this valve-reduced reality can be bypassed, and mind at large partially admitted by the personal psyche. The schizophrenic has lost the way back, and can no longer take refuge in the homemade universe of common sense, the strictly human world of useful notions, shared symbols, and socially acceptable conventions. Ronald Lang might say the schizophrenic may be hiding, not lost, or even on a private adventure from which he simply does not care to come back. Mind at large gives to a continuum of event an anthropomorphic shape that the situation may not warrant. Our reducing valve may be designed not so much to protect us from being overwhelmed by those 7 million shades of color, for instance, as designed to simplify and realize, literally select, focus, and make real a specific event out of a continuum of possible events. The only reality available in this universe may well be a homemade one. Sherwood wrote of an apparent universality of perception in the psychedelic experience. He attributed this universal central perception to a single reality. Cohen
Book is firing me up. Hitting some good points here. Huxley considered our consciousness but a segment of a larger one. That's deep. Mind at large gives to a continuum of events on anthropomorphic shape that the situation may not warrant. Okay. We'll listen for a little longer. We're going to finish the chapter.
Cohen takes a more nihilistic view, arguing that once the mind is unhinged from normal categories, regardless of the means used, it can only go in a limited number of directions. He called such departures unsanity to distinguish them from insanity. He considered unsanity the common pathway of the stressed mind.
Okay.
Variations of the unhinged experience contain a common core of necessity, according to Cohen. In another context, however, Cohen points out that the underlying motivation impelling the drug taker or systems follower to break with the norm is the nucleus for what is then experienced. A combination of these two observations by Cohen gives insight into the reality function. The common core of mind may be the autistic mode of thinking, itself a kind of mirror for some ultimate notion or desire coming from consciousness. Carrington considered consciousness an intensified point on a spectrum of unconsciousness. He rejected the metaphors of a layered consciousness as found in depth psychology. He favored a field of consciousness, the mind belonging to this field rather than the field belonging to the mind. Even material objects are only logical constructions from different appearances or possibilities for sense data. The limitations of the human mind are thus only matters of fact, not matters of some universal law. Carrington's working model is related to Whitehead's theory of organism, where the event is the core of reality. No simple location, or set of simple assumptions, can in themselves grasp the unity of the event. For Whitehead, nature is a structure of evolving processes, and the reality is the process. Bruner, in his study of thinking, discusses experiments in sensory deprivation. These experiments were designed to find out what happens when a person is shut off from all intake of perceptual data. A subject is isolated in a sound and light-proofed room. He lies on foam rubber, wears velvet gloves, and everything is done to block out any possibility for sensory intake. Microphones, electrographic apparatus picking up brain waves which are amplified and recorded, and related devices keep tab on the subject's reactions. After a period of this womb-like condition, the subject begins to hallucinate. Voices, images, movements, sensations, entire episodes begin to take place. Deprived of ordinary sensory data from which to select according to the needs of his worldview, his mind structures a reality, drawing on past data. This structuring happens to the personality, too. He is not necessarily aware that he is hallucinating. He feels himself very much a part of the resulting event. The event takes place around him as an ordinary occasion. His sensory system is in full play, sending appropriate sights, smells, tastes, touches, and so on as needed by the mind for its reality. 28. There is a rough similarity here with the Tibetan tulpa and other psychic creations, such as Carlos Castaneda's experiences with Don Juan, as I will relate later. Bruner subjects, however, have no pre-structured set of expectancies around which to orient their synthetic creations, and without such, and without the social world as definition and criteria, the experiences tend to become chaotic and nightmarish. In 1963, two miners, Felon and Throne, were isolated for 19 days in a Pennsylvania mine collapse.
Yikes.
After a while, they began to be able to see and were able to maneuver and improve their conditions. They shared hallucinations, seeing the same imaginary things at the same time.
Yikes.
At one time, both men saw a great doorway rimmed in blue light and a flight of marble steps beyond. At
No
another
way.
time, they saw two men walking along with miners' lanterns and called to them, at which the apparitions faded. The miners were, of course, in a tiny pocket nearly a mile underground, without lights of any sort. One wonders what would have happened had they gone up the blue-lit doorway and steps, as they debated trying.
Wow.
The experiences of folie
Why?
à deux, or shared hallucinations, had a numinous quality deeply impressing the two rough miners, and the blue light described sounds quite similar to the light of the sacred mushroom experiences of the Mexicans. Stephen McKellar argues that all mental experiences, no matter how bizarre and novel, are related to and originate in learned or subliminal information gained from experience. Secondary percepts, those gained vicariously from reading, listening to others, movies, and so on, must be taken into account. We can
Okay.
have perfectly real memories of other people's imaginings, just as we dream on former dream content or have specific childhood memories that originated in dreams or fantasies. McKellar claims that no subject matter for thought is possible except from an external source. Our most unrestrained imaginings, works of art and science, all derive from recent and/or remote perceptions. McKellar seems on strong grounds. Even so esoteric a production as the Yogic Tulpa proves to have its inception in commonly shared perceptions, and, as will be noted with Carlos Castaneda's extremely strange experiences, the initial point of departure was some tangible perception from the mundane world. Freud's analysis of dreams is one of McKellar's points of reference, however, and there is tacit acceptance of Freud's interpretation of the unconscious as limited to the repressed, peripheral, forgotten episodes of an individual's experience. Yet there are experiences that suggest a mental structure more flexible than Freudian. There are experiences that point to a collective level of consciousness and unconscious changes. Suspending one's reality adjustment can open one to experiences neither available to, nor amenable to, examination by logical thinking. For instance, one rainy afternoon when I was young, friends and I were pleasantly listening to Mahler and chatting of inanities when, crossing the room, I suddenly passed out. It was a bone-dry gathering, inside at least, and I had never done such an asinine thing before. Instantly, I was looking at the hand of my girl, then some 250 miles away, writing me a letter. She was shooting me down, as we used to say, a point of no small emotional impact for me. Immediately, I regained consciousness, having been out only momentarily, just long enough to upset my roommate and friends. I told my friend of the letter later that day. A couple of days later, he brought in the mail, amused at the coincidence as he handed me the letter from the girl, postmarked the fateful afternoon. I made my roommate open the actual letter, however, and check as I recited the contents,
Little
burned
boy.
into my brain as they were. This paled my friend and unhinged his day. Unconscious exchanges and shared hallucinations between two or three gathered together in a common cause or belief express themselves in many ways. The experiences of
Castaneda's and Don Juan will prove to incorporate this phenomenon. Spiritualists, for instance, in their desire for information from the other side, suspend all criteria of ordinary, social thinking. As a group, they enter into a subset of experience, a kind of shared autistic hypnagogic state. Gathering together.
29. Strengthens their faith in the validity of their system. Their desire for conviction suspends the criteria used in ordinary reality, criteria standing in the way of the esoterica desired. The believers accept avidly everything produced, since doubt would split the fabric of their state. Eternal knaves feed on eternal fools, of course, and charlatanism runs rife.
Rife, but so do genuine mind-picking, telepathy, clairvoyance, a kind of yogic tulpa creation, and a variety of phenomena not available to the ordinary processes. Having spent some time at a spiritualist camp, I attempted comment to a true believing
Give
friend.
Brian a chance.
He stated, however, that a wise person would spend 20 years or so in the Brotherhood, in careful, devoted study, before attempting to draw any conclusion at all. 20 years, indeed far less, of devoted study would only be sustained, of course, by one who had already decided that the framework offered sufficient reward to justify the life investment. That very decision would have set into motion the kind of restructuring of mind the new procedure would require. Further, the mind would make the adjustment, the restructuring of concept sooner or later, in order to justify the investment of self. The mind would eventually reorganize to get the kind of percepts the new worldview would need. It would be a self-verifying maneuver. We easily dismiss as illusory and occult such esoteric plays of mind. Two things should be borne in mind, however. First, the productions of these two or three gathered together asking for certain things and agreeing on the means of getting them are quite genuine. The system produces as it aims to produce. Secondly, and more difficult to recognize, is that the same mirroring function underlies a science, a respectable discipline, a religion, or what have you. This assertion will equally offend the spiritualist, the scientist, and the theologian, since each apparently must represent his system as an absolute out there distinct from and objectively existing apart from himself, in order to have the non-ambiguous faith to sustain the very fabric of his system. Extrasensory experience may be a misnomer, but such occurrences are compatible with Carrington's field of consciousness theory, as well as Whitehead's theory. In a sense, Whitehead once said, "All things are in all places at the same time." Extrasensory influence of a sleeping person's dreams has been investigated at Brooklyn's Maimonida Hospital. Dr. Montague Ullman and psychologist Stanley Krippner used the classic dream investigation technique devised by Nathaniel Kleitman at the University of Chicago. By using special equipment, much the same as in the sensory deprivation experiments, records can be made during sleep of eye movements, breathing, subvocal activity, brain wave patterns, and so on. From these, it can be determined when a person is dreaming. A sleeping subject is in one room, all the apparatus attached. A researcher observing the equipment is in the next room. Dr. Ullman, in a third room, studies a target picture and tries to influence the dreams of the sleeping person. The equipment shows when the subject starts dreaming, after which he is awakened and asked to relate the dream. Sealed envelopes, containing pictures, one of which is the target picture, are then given the subject, who correctly chooses the one he saw in his dreams. In one example, Ullman concentrated on a Gauguin painting, Still Life with Three Puppies, which had blue goblets in it. The subject dreamed of a couple of dogs making a noise and dark blue bottles. In another trial, Ullman concentrated on a painting called Zapatistas, showing followers of the Mexican revolutionary Zapata. The followers march along a road with a range of mountains in the background. The dreamer, when awakened, explained that his dream was about New Mexico. A file of Indians were going to Santa Fe for fiesta time, with great mountains in the background. Now the subject had once lived in New Mexico and had seen Indians going to Santa Fe for fiesta. Simple fortuitousness could be presumed, but note that it is only similar data, found already in the subject's background, that is triggered up. Nothing new is given the subject precisely as McKellar would claim. There is, instead, this calling up and regrouping of previous perceptual contents in keeping with the stimulus of the non-sensory source. This justifies both Jung and McKellar, making them complementary rather than opposing. 30. The blueprint comes from the non-personal source, but it must be filled in with a content individual and unique. Paul Tillich claims that divine answers are given the form of existential questions, rather the reverse of the above. The Russian parapsychologist Vasiliev writes of subjecting hypnotized persons to fake mustard plasters. Peasants who had never heard of a mustard plaster had no reaction whatsoever to the fake application. Patients who had experienced a real one suffered the usual red rashy, heat-irritated skin, and sweated profusely. The inexperienced peasants were then given, in their normal state, a real mustard plaster treatment. After that, they produced all the appropriate symptoms in the hypnotic experiments. Carl Jung found cases in madmen of experiences beyond the personal background. He told of a schizophrenic patient in his 30s hospitalized since his early 20s with delusions of grandeur, visions, demonic seizures, and so on. One day the patient,
Hold on.
blinking up at the sun, stopped Dr. Jung and showed him how by scrooching up his eyes, he could see the sun's phallus swinging below the rim of the sun. When one moved one's head from side to side, the phallus could also be seen to swing from side to side, and that was the origin of the winds. This was such a strange hallucination that Jung carefully noted it, along with the patient's history. In the course of his studies of mythology, Jung was sent a new book of translations by Dietrich, including the Paris Magical Papyrus, thought to be a liturgy of the Mithraic cult. Here Jung found, stated in the same terms, but in cultic poetry, the identical sun-phallus wind vision described by his patient. Cryptomnesia or hidden memory was ruled out. Jung later came across other references to the vision from Greek and medieval sources. Jung used such cases to establish his three-tiered cosmology: consciousness, personal unconscious, and collective unconscious. Adopting his system, things can be seen in just this way, though others might use the material as grist for other mills. Anticipating my fourth chapter on questions and answers, I would mention that the patient's history suggested just the kind of vision he experienced. It was the kind of esoteric, cultic information and secret insight for which he had longed in his mundane, uneventful, and uneducated adolescence, the very drift which had eventually brought on his reality suspension and produced his retreat from the world. Fulfillment of desire was surely one of the elements in the experience. The patient called up from the continuum of past experience the sort of thing he desired. The sun was the trigger for the ancient imagery, and the imagery was as valid to the patient as anything else, since all criteria of ordinary reality adjustment had long since been suspended. None of this validates Jung against Mackellar. Rather, it shows Mackellar's recent or remote perceptions to be active on a wider scale than at first evident. The roots of our garden clearing in the forest are not shallow, and the common core of the unhinged mind may run deeper than Cohen suspects. This does not give to this background of ours a character of its own, however. If this continuum of experience is Huxley's mind at large, such a mind has no criteria or value, and as such, mind, as we know it, is hardly the right term.
A phallus swinging from the rim of the sun and causing winds just as true within this continuum as the most sophisticated recent scientific jargon for the origin of solar winds. In his book on mysticism, Princeton's elderly philosopher Walter Stace included an experience by the writer Arthur Koestler, who was in solitary confinement for several months during the Spanish Civil War. He was supposedly awaiting execution, and too, while away, the time he revived his aesthetic interest in analytical geometry, stretching theorems on the wall. Euclid's proof that the number of primes is infinite led to a classical example of the spontaneous mystical experience. He became enchanted with the idea that a meaningful and comprehensive statement about the infinite could be arrived at by precise and infinite means, without priestly ambiguity. One day the significance of this swept over him like a wave, leaving him in a worldless essence. Fragrance of eternity, a quiver of the arrow in the blue, led to a river of peace under bridges of silence that came from nowhere and flowed nowhere. Finally, there was no river and no I. Kay's I had ceased to exist. He had become one with that infinite. That could have been Kay's self had ceased to exist. It'd be easier to read out loud, just saying. He apologized for such an embarrassing confession, stating that he had read the meaning and nibbled at logical positivism. He considered himself tough-minded as anyone, he nevertheless recognized from his personal experience an interlocking of all events and interdependence in all things. He spoke of a universal pool and a unity of all things. He had many recurrences of the experience in prison, though they faded and disappeared after his return to normal life. Consider now that Kay's world at the time consisted of 4 gray stone walls. The only window was a tiny opening high in the wall, which only a patch of sky could be seen. Week after week passed with no voices, no communications, no modification to another. It was a kind of sensory deprivation. All remaining was his growing fascination with geometry. Consider, too, that he had been subject to an unannounced firing squad for months. Daily he had heard neighboring cellmates being led to the courtyard onto which his tiny window opened. Daily he had heard the volley of shots. As with Faye's frustration at Einstein's speed limit, did the idea of infinite or infinity have real meaning to Kay's as a crack in an infinite egg? As the full meaning of finite or in on him inescapably did his own synthesis of infinite begin? Was this finally occurring experience not a eureka illumination, keeping with the nature of the trigger? Did his deep strata desire not use as vehicle the only outlet available to his tough-minded worldview, namely geometry? Free of those beastly ambiguities he had found it, of belief, was his experience then not only both with the nature of the trigger and the materials available for yet satisfying the underlying ultimate desire. This is the case with all other experience, regardless of the, as I will try to show with this scientific breakthrough. As Kay's experience was not similar to my friend's Mozart Sonata or my apple tree illumination. Chapter 4, what's going to be outlined is other experiences in science, religion, philosophy, and so on. Some of them radical ideas that have played a formative role in our modern world. And will show that they will all follow the same general pattern. We cannot disparage this type of experience as subjective illusion. Rather, it is the way by which the crack in the egg literally materializes. The spirituality-minded may be upset that this greatest of human experience, the religious illumination, is described as the synthetic production of a stressed mind, and not an opening to Huxley's mind at large. James Oversoul, the Stoic Christian world governor of the universe, or what have you. If the surface realism can be penetrated, however, a possibility more profound than either spiritualism or realism can be found. Same function of mind that gives Kay's intimations of immortality produces the scientific postulate that changes the reality structure, or allows the Hindu to walk through beds of fire. On and on and on. The universal pool is as much in here as anywhere. Being A by nature, anything desired can be gotten from it. One is willing to pay the price and has the ultimate around which the process can orient. Hard discipline of mind and passionate adherence to belief in spite of all obstacles, all evidence to the contrary, can overcome all obstacles and bring about the necessary evidence. The mirrors of reality play are brought into alignment by a non-ambiguous commitment from a conscious mind. The other mirror is automatically And Livingston points out that our logical process relates to the language learned. He questions the correspondence between what we perceive and what of our environment. That would extend his question to ask, is there such a thing as real nature of our environment? Cohen assumes that if there is, man can never know it. All we can know, as Bruner said, our own representation of the world, a representation, Jung might add, carried as a blueprint within our culture, filled with an endless variety of diverse content, shaped by concept percept and the semantic universe, this and that. There is nothing orderly or logical to the function that this is trying to outline. No evidence of any cosmic powers, keeping yada yada yada. I'm going to move on to this part here. There is nevertheless an open-ended aspect for us, a creative one, and glimpse through autistic thinking. There is a bridge between clearing the forest, between logical man and his non-logical potential. William Blake claimed that anything capable of being imagined is the truth. We openly shape reality when we diligently apply every ounce of our logical process to human desire. We are subject to the same effect on less conscious level. Views, conflicting assumptions also enter as shaping forces in reality and happen to us as random confusion, luck, and fate. It takes an ultimate commitment to damp out and exclude other possibilities so that one possibility might formulate and be realized. A thought can synthesize or break into consciousness, anything desired. So when we return back to this book at some point, we'll go here, chapter 3. Closing it out. Tired. What I need to do is get the Grindhouse movie ready. Final thoughts on what we read today. The mind over matter thing. The author is making a hard justification and doing a really good job at selling it, the idea of it having something to do with autistic thinking. And it being a way to either alter or step into a different reality. This person's example was in their childhood, burning themselves with cigarettes, but not being scarred or burned when they went to the doctor, and the doctors wouldn't be able to explain it. Or monks being able to firewalk, walk on hot coals. Other strange situations where like a child is obsessed with a toy and the toy becomes like a imaginary friend for a period of time, like 4 days. And that was strange because when they said the child snapped too, the child said that they were given a choice to either continue to be friends with them or, yeah, definitely a lot to reflect on here. Again, anything when we read here on stream, just I would say take with a grain of salt or take what you will from it. Not trying to preach, trying to read other people's perspectives and keep an open mind, trying to be a sponge. Now if you're into Discord, I'm going to be doing movies. Yep, right here. Oh. I'm going to be here in a cinema. Boom. Like that. Cool. I gotta get the movies ready. Gotta get that started. So, thanks for watching TapX. Next time. Later.